venture capital world, mashallah. Assalamualaikum, Brother Umar. Uh,
Waalaikumsalam.
all right. Before I dig deeper into the topic today on tech-driven future, allow me to introduce Brother Umar, and of course introduce myself, like be reminded by Dr. Amin. So I'm Shara Yusof. I have been actively involved in Islamic finance in Malaysia for almost 10 years now. So, our speaker today, Brother Umar Munshi, is the managing partner of Hassan VC, which evolved from Atis Angel Syndicate Network, eventually becoming an angel fund with limited partners from all around the world. Hassan VC is a venture capital firm that focuses on founders and includes a virtual accelerator program, which invests in early stage camel startups. Am I right? All right.
Yes,
So, Brother Umar also co-founded Ethis, a pioneering venture builder that builds platform based on the universal principles of Islamic economics to redefine finance for the betterment of humanity. So today we got the topic on tech-driven future. Is Islamic finance ready for startups? So here's my first question to you, Brother Umar. How do you define a tech driven future in the context of Islamic finance? And what role do startups play in shaping the future of Islamic finance? Over to you,
sure.
brother.
Thank you for the first question. Assalamualaikum, everybody, and thank you also to the organizers for inviting me to share my reflections. Hopefully, it'll be of benefit. And to jump to your first question, well, I've actually been in Islamic finance for probably about 13 years now. Um, uh, and throughout, I've basically been trying to learn Islamic finance and trying to create new ventures or products or solutions based on Islamic finance, right? Because when we first started, it was in Singapore
Mm-hmm.
back then in 2013, and there weren't many Islamic finance products available. So to how it's related to your question is that when we first started, it was to solve a problem in our community, right?
Mm.
So and that's what I truly believe Islamic finance is all about, to bring solutions to the ummah and as well as to humanity, right? So when we talk about when you ask me how does tech relate to Islamic finance, well, basically to this world, it's really all about tech. All the good is tech, all the bad is tech. All
Exactly.
the opportunities are tech, all the risks and threats to to our lives are also back to tech, as we can see very clearly now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the future or the current state of humanity is very much driven by tech, and if Islamic finance is not there, is not present, firstly, it's not so relevant anymore. It will be like become less relevant, and secondly, it's a big wasted opportunity for us to lead something that's very important, or at least have a part to play in this space.
So when you mention, of course, technology is here. That even ourselves nowadays is online via tech. But how does tech and startups in Islamic finance can actually build that humanity, can actually contribute to the development of humanity from your
Yes.
experiences, Brother Umar?
Yep. So uh, if you specifically focus on Islamic finance, then of course you'll be talking more about fintech, right?
Mm.
But if we expand Islamic finance, so if you view it as how do we develop Islamic finance, then it's more about the fintech side of things. How fintech can manifest or create products that are based on Islamic finance principles in a way that traditional finance could not have or was not able to, right? So, for example, I'll highlight a fintech which is started by one of my friends, and it's a very interesting takaful product that is purely online and is based on the pure mutual takaful method. And what how it's different is that it is self-managed through a blockchain-based system, right? So in that way, the transparency is clear. the rules are followed, and there's no sort of opposing commercial um, entity that is there to make money, right?
Okay.
Because Tagaful is meant to be social. So that is something that in the past was maybe not possible, but now with blockchain or Web3, it is possible. So on one hand, technology, fintech advances Islamic finance in terms of products. When my angle and my focus in Hassan VC, our focus is more of how we can or we need to have venture capital and angel investments within the landscape of Islamic finance, so that Islamic finance can fund startups and innovation. Yeah, and to address your question on how startups are relevant in terms of the technology of the future, especially today with so much new AI infrastructure that
Definitely.
anyone can basically leverage on. It's really about creating solutions for the world. And with Islamic finance, not only the Sharia compliance part, but the deeper economic fundamentals of Islamic economics, right? About justice, fairness, about not doing any harm, and so on. Um, this is where Islamic finance can help drive, can help develop, invest in, and thus develop a new type of better commercial entities, right? Better solutions, better startups that are also ethical. Yeah. So that's I guess just scratching the surface of this quite big topic.
Exactly, exactly. You mentioned just now that where venture capital also needs, the fundings, and this is where the banking institution comes into play, right? So, how do you see that the banking sector, Islamic banks, and investors ready to fund high-risk startups that, of course, is within the Sharia compliant framework? So,
Yeah. Um, okay. Frankly, I don't think it's really something the banks will or should do, because
exactly.
banks are not meant to take risk. So I'm talking about Islamic finance outside of banking, maybe supported by banking, right? Because Islamic finance today, from my understanding, it's very much dominated by banking,
Yeah.
and the bank in itself, in terms of Islamic principles, is not supposed to make money from money. It's supposed to safekeep money, right?
Mhm.
But that's not what many banks are doing. And on the other extreme, we have large fund managers, private equity firms that basically invest in public stocks or in large entities, right? So
Mhm.
the mass middle and lower strata of the business world is
Mhm.
untouched by Islamic finance. SMEs are not funded by Islamic finance, not much anyway, and startups have almost zero options. So this is, I feel, very strange, very tragic. In our own 10 years of experience in Ethis, we've had so many sort of so-called non-Muslim or conventional entities and
Mm.
investors coming to us, but we didn't want to go down that path, and we tried to engage the Islamic finance community to very little outcomes. And we're not the only ones. There are many others who are struggling to find Sharia compliant halal investments for startups, right? So it is really a black a gap, a huge, strange gap that should not even exist. But right now it's almost non-existent. VC in Islamic finance is essentially almost non-existent, and I think that's why I'm bringing up this topic today.
So, what would you encourage for? When you say it's almost non-existent, but there's a big potential in it, right? But so how
Exactly.
do we
Yes.
encourage probably the young entrepreneurs or the tech innovators to just take a risk and just do it, despite the challenges, of course. So,
Yeah. So
what would
so the good thing is for a long time, right? The Ummah, unfortunately, in many parts of the world, Muslims are more consumers
mm,
rather than own business owners or producers, right? That's just somehow the default scenario a lot of our communities are in. However, in the past 3 years, I've seen very clearly a trend, especially among younger people, of a lot more entrepreneurship, right? So on that front, that demand is really growing. That the supply of entrepreneurs is really increasing very significantly, and this is driven by also a realization or awakening that we need to have control over our own products. We need to create products that are in line with our faith. We need to create products that serve humanity, that counter the runaway capitalism, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's not so much about encouraging. I mean, the entrepreneurs are encouraging themselves. They are coming up. It's just that the Islamic finance industry is very separated from that world, right? So we are sort of trying to bridge the two worlds because I know a little bit about the Islamic finance world. I'm trying to pull it into the startup world.
Do you find it the challenges of like bringing the gap closer is because of the regulations, or
Mm.
is it because of risk appetite
No,
from that
nothing. I would say
point?
nothing to do with regulations. Regulations don't block this in any way. In fact,
Okay.
I would say that for Islamic finance to get into banking as it has done, there's a lot of regulatory challenges. But for Islamic finance to enter VC, there's no regulatory challenge in the sense that it's equity investment. It's a profit and
Okay.
loss sharing. It's a musyarakah,
Yeah.
pure play musyarakah, right? On based on standard ordinary shares investment. One thing interesting, I'm digressing a little bit. Maybe some of you who are from Islamic finance may not be so aware. Over the past 3 years, venture capital itself, which mainly comes from Silicon Valley, is being disrupted by itself. It's sort of crashed and now is being rebuilt. And it crashed because of too much speculation, hype, greed, and cheap money, right? So if Islamic finance had a say in how venture capital was formed, we could have, sort of maybe avoided that crash, right? And then now today, venture capital is going back to the basics, removing all these terms that protect investors in a one-sided way and so on, and becoming pure play musyarakah again. So I would say it's very aligned with Islamic finance. What's missing maybe is the awareness, the education, because there's a certain approach to investing into startups.
Exactly.
And one thing you pointed out is the risk appetite. We as Muslims in Islamic finance, ideally or fundamentally, should embrace risk and put in the effort, but leave the outcome to Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. However, in my experience so far, my experience is not reflective of the whole reality, but it seems like Islamic finance institutions are highly risk averse.
Exactly. Exactly. From your
Yeah.
own experience, Brother Umar, for the past 13 years in developing and trying to get every venture capital together, is there any stories about how do the venture capital actually survive and probably from a failure and just survive again, and what was the motivation to just continue to do venture capital?
All
And
right.
to all, and besides all this tech driven here, and with the AI coming, big data coming, so how do you like continuously and motivatedly to do venture capital in the industry?
All right. Well, for most of my entrepreneurship journey in Islamic finance, it was not venture capital, right? It was, we have a P2P or lending, short-term financing, supply chain platform, equity platform, crowdfunding platforms, and so on. Venture capital, we started only about a year plus ago. But before that, for 5 years, we have been running an angel group. An angel group, basically angel investors are individuals who invest in startups, right? So we have been in this space for some time. The motivation comes from, okay, let me give you an example. How we do things at Hassan VC is we have an accelerator program, which is more like a training, coaching, mentoring program, which helps equip the startups and helps us to get to know them and build a community. And after this program, then our VC fund will go through the process of investing in some of them, right?
Oh.
So far, we have more than 100 founders who have gone through our program over 2 cycles. and we've invested in 12 companies from the first round. And now the second round of our accelerator just completed. We are about to invest in another 12, right? So inshallah, by the end of this year, we would have 30 plus startups in our portfolio. By middle next year, we will reach our target of 40 to 50, inshallah. Now, um, I'll just share an example of uh, a couple from Indonesia that's doing a business startup, and they're doing very well. They're growing very fast. They have good past experience and so on. When I asked them, what did you learn or what do you feel is most valuable from our program, they said, and they repeated this a few times, that they are practicing Muslims, but they never saw their business, which is a medical technology business, they never saw their startup as or business as a form of ibadah, right? So in our program, that's one of the things that we share and we help our participants to understand, and that makes a big difference, right? Because now to them, they understand that it's not just doing business, it's not just making money, it's not just chasing after material success. It's also at the same time looking after akhirah, right? So for them, it was an incredible moment of awakening, right? To some of us, maybe it's obvious or it's understood or we already think that way, but for a lot of people, a lot of Muslims, they don't know that, they don't see that, yeah. So merging Islamic principles into the venture capital space, I feel, has a lot of benefits both ways, because in VC, I would say, the biggest risk is actually ethics, where startup founders suddenly get a lot of money, and some of them do not carry the responsibility or the amanah well, right? Or they become fraudulent, or they don't spend wisely, right? But when you see the business as an ibadah, and you accept the amanah of the money being entrusted to you, and with that worldview, inshallah, it will make startup founders more responsible, more ethical, and from there, it will create a more sustainable venture capital space.
MashaAllah. It does seems interesting on how the ecosystem that you have created for the angels investors. But
Alhamdulillah. It's
but
very sorry to interrupt. Just sharing, because we just had an investor session about 2 hours ago before
oh,
before iftar, and we were sharing with our investors some statistics and so on, because the second round just completed. The largest, we have about 50 investors in our fund, right? And they're from different parts of the world. The fund is in Labuan, Malaysia, and we invest mostly in Southeast Asia, although we also invest outside, right? Now, the biggest group of investors is from Singapore, like in terms of money capital contribution. Second is Canada, right?
Canada.
Just like exactly, they are halfway around the world. Canada, and then third is Malaysia, Qatar, Saudi, UK. Right? So it's very spread out, So I think it's very interesting that um, it's a very niche space, but a lot of Muslims around the world are starting to look into this space, right? And they can't find anything halal, and that's why they come to us, because they're like, we're trying to find halal VC, and you're all we could find, you know. Yeah. So Alhamdulillah, we are here at a good time. I would say we are late to the game, but better late than never.
Oh, better late than never. Better late than never. But I think I've been once to your session of Hassan VC when you started. So I was out of curiosity. You know how this tech driven, because everyone has its phone now. Technology is in everyone's hands.
Yes.
But do you find it can be actually disruptive towards the investors and also to the players in the venture capital?
Hmm.
Or do you
Well,
see it as
yeah.
an opportunity actually?
Yeah. I mean, technology is a double-edged sword, right?
Mm.
AI it can bring tremendous benefit, and it can create tremendous problems as well, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I mean, if any of you here have been using all this GPT and DeepSeek, you will see that a lot of the times they give poor or wrong, or totally wrong information. I've seen so much wrong information, because when I do research on my own industry, which I'm an expert at, it just tells me nonsense. And even when I try to hint to it that this is wrong, it will still repeat the same thing. I'll ask it to recheck and so on. It still gives me the wrong information, and it's just made up information. It's so-called hallucination. But let's not go so deep into that. My point is, um, technology definitely has two sides to it, right? And I feel that's why it's necessary. I would even think it's an obligation for Islamic finance leaders to look into this space, because if not, we will be where we are now, where we own almost nothing except Quran apps. Even Quran apps, the biggest ibadah app in the world with more than 100 million Muslims, which was founded by a Muslim revert long time ago. I'm not going to name names. Some of you may know. It was acquired by private equity firms, right? And I know that the founder tried to sell it to Islamic institutions many years ago. None of them came forward. None of them went through. So in the end, he sold to sort of so-called conventional entities, right? There are Muslims in those conventional entities, right? But I mean, it should be kept as an asset for the Ummah. Imagine the data of 100 million Muslims, right? It's a lot. It's very, very valuable, and we lost that because we were not able or willing to invest in it. Yeah, so it's a big waste. I'll give you another example. One of the Quran apps that we invested in from Indonesia, they have about 1 million monthly active users during Ramadan, right? They use AI to help their users read the Quran better, and then there are tests and so on, and that connects you to a ustaz and everything. So they grew the business for 4 years without taking any investment. And when we met them, they were so happy and so excited because they said, we've been looking for halal investment for so long, we couldn't find any. And all the investors who are interested in us are all conventional, and they don't understand Quran. They don't understand why the motivation for Muslims reading the Quran, right? And our motive is, I mean, their motive is to spread the Quran as much as possible. It's not to make as much money as possible, right? So there is that disconnect there, and Alhamdulillah, we are blessed to have this opportunity to try to solve that. And Alhamdulillah, maybe a lot of people are not aware, but there are many other initiatives like Hassan right now. I'm very happy to see them in different parts of the world. There's one in the US, one in the UK, one in Canada. In the GCC, there are a few. So far, I think in this part of the world, there are not too many, and probably we're one of the few. But Alhamdulillah, only in the past 1 year, all of this started coming up. But the thing is, while they are all focused on halal and Muslims, most of them are not from Islamic finance and don't know much about Islamic finance, and are not connected to the Islamic finance industry. Right? There's a big gap, disconnect somehow. Yeah.
So, but when you mentioned that, then how can Islamic finance, I believe venture capital is also existing in the conventional side, right? So how
Yes.
do Islamic finance compete with conventional venture capital in funding startups?
All right. So first, I think that we need to have at least awareness among Islamic finance industry about venture capital. Why I say this is when we started, we saw that there was almost no precedents we could find of Islamic contracts, right? All the standard contracts that were being used had some of them even direct equity contracts and whatnot, but they had elements of Sharia issues, and we couldn't find any examples. We had to create our own. We had to get our Sharia advisor, work closely with them to create new documents because they just did not exist. And venture capital has been around for 30 years, right? It's not new, it's 40 years, right? When Islamic finance started, venture capital also started in the West, modern day venture capital. So I think what's needed is visionary leaders, Islamic finance, Islamic finance leaders we need to get their buy-in, right? That this is important, that this is valuable, that this is necessary, and then we need to put money where our mouth is, because we have met many Islamic finance institutions that are always happy to meet us or happy to meet startups, and they're all excited and everything, but money doesn't move after that, so which is a waste, right? And yeah, so there needs to be real money, and Alhamdulillah, we can see today that in Malaysia, the government is pushing for
Yeah.
venture capital, although again, somehow Islamic finance is left out. I really don't know why. And in Saudi, venture capital is booming, so naturally there'll be a lot of Islamic players there. But again, it's not really. Maybe it's a matter of branding. They're not branding it as Islamic. It seems that a lot of Muslims in venture capital believe they're doing halal, but they don't actually have Sharia advisors or Sharia boards, right? They just assume it's halal. Yeah. And recently in Qatar as well. So there is movement in the Muslim world, uh, but strangely the movement is not together with the Islamic finance industry.
Okay. Well, that's something that needs to be worked out in the Islamic finance leaders that you said just now. The visionary of and seeing the opportunity of venture capital towards the development of economy, because I
Yep.
believe venture capital can actually be the players towards the economy for Muslims, basically. We do have some questions here already, Brother Umar. So I'm gonna
Sure.
ask on the first one will be, how do you rate Muslim-led Islamic startups in general?
All right. Well, I mean, it won't be fair to generalize and say in general, but um, I would say that from my own experience, right? There's a lot of tech talent, Muslim tech talent, in all these global big techs. You'll be surprised, right? You go whatever Google, Apple, maybe not the China ones, but yeah, in the West, a lot of top Muslims. I mean, most of them tend to be from South Asia, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, Indians, who are really really up there and top level talent. And
Mm.
today they're starting to become entrepreneurs, Alhamdulillah, right? Because they've spent 5, 10, 15 years, building stuff for others. But that is mainly in the West, mainly in the West because the tech ecosystem is so developed and the talent has been there for some time. Muslim talent has been there for some time. In this part of the world, and maybe many other parts of the Muslim world, there is a little bit of a lack of entrepreneurship pedigree, right? Because maybe the family, there are no entrepreneurs or business people in the family, right? The entrepreneur is sort of on their own.
Mm.
Sometimes not only on their own, when they talk to their family, they are discouraged or
Yeah.
prevented from doing business,
Yeah.
which is contrary to what we know as Muslims that our risk is in doing business, right?
Business.
Yeah. So there's definitely talent, but a lot of education, and especially we believe that it's about having a community because you need a support system when you are a founder, when you are a startup founder. It's a tough, challenging, can be lonely journey. So if there's a group of people together, alignment of values, helping each other, like what Alhamdulillah we have managed to create so far, then it makes a big difference, right? The entrepreneurs and founders learn faster, they have more emotional comfort and support, and as a community, there's inshallah a lot more barakah.
Alhamdulillah. Um, Interesting question following up to this one is, what goes through the investor's mind when investing in early stage startups?
All right. Maybe here I'll talk about the camel startup.
Exactly.
Yeah. So as I was saying, mentioning earlier, venture capital has changed a lot in the past 3 years, which is why it's a good time to enter, right? Um, because when things are changing, there's opportunity to recreate things in a better way. Yeah. So Islamic finance should be there to help recreate venture capital in a more ethical way. But back to the question, um, the most venture capital theories, concepts, and material or research that you do, you'll find is mainly almost all US, Silicon Valley, and then from there the rest of the world copies, right? But the the approach there, firstly, in Silicon Valley itself, is now being rejected by many VCs, and they are going back to what they used to do in the past before things got out of hand. For the rest of the world, somehow we are still a bit hung over with the Silicon Valley model. Now, what do I mean by Silicon Valley model is the VC will invest. Of course, they won't invest anyhow. They do very deep due diligence and screening and whatnot and selection. But they expect the majority of their portfolio to fail and a few big outliers to boom and become unicorns. And these unicorns or billion-dollar companies or startups are the ones that give the return back to the fund, right? So typically, 3 to 5% of a fund's portfolio, that means number of startups, are the ones that return the capital and the profits to the fund. And the rest, in theory, don't matter, right? So that's how VCs think and tend to think even today. Now, our approach is in this part of the world, especially in the GCC, um, instead of looking for unicorns, which don't exist, or yeah, it's a fairy tale. We look for camels because camels are a very powerful analogy. It's an animal that can survive the harshest conditions. It can, go through all sorts of hardship that no other animal can, no other mammal can. And yet, when it finds water, it can, drink the water very quickly so that it can regain its strength. And when it needs to run, it can run. So uh, that's what we are looking for: startups that are resilient, able to go through tough times, and when there's opportunity, it's able to grab that opportunity, right? That's the from the animal analogy point of view. And in terms of what we look for, especially in early stage startups, is firstly, what problem are they trying to solve, right? And is it? I mean, we'll never know for sure, but we try our best to understand and evaluate whether it is the right timing for the particular market, right? Whether it's a sizable enough and growing market. Yeah. For example, one of the startups that we invested in, they are focused on software for freelancers, content creators and all that, to help simplify their admin, their invoicing, their lead generation and all that, all in one simple to use easy system, right? For young people, right? Who don't want the complexity of having to work with accountants and all that, right? And we see that is a growing space, right? There's another one we are investing in, inshallah. They provide software for um, drones or any other kind of camera, right? And that software will analyze footage and provide insights. In this case, they serve Petronas and other big entities, right? Because it helps them to the clients to look after their infrastructure, right? So these are all definitely trends, right? AI definitely is a trend as well. One of the startups that we are investing in, they have a search engine that you can search for work. For opportunities, right? Freelance opportunities, consultancy opportunities. So you search there, and the AI from their search engine will search social media and bring
Wow.
back to you opportunities, right? Yeah. So I mean, these are all growing areas that we believe will continue to grow. So that's one probably most important or one of the main components. The second one is the people, the founders, right? Who are they? Why are they doing it? What's their strengths, and so on. Because you may have the best product in the best market, but a bad founder may not be able to carry the opportunity,
Yeah,
right?
that's
But if you have very good founder, very good product, but no market, it's still not going to work. So market comes first, and then the founder.
I see. A question coming from the audience. How novel can Islamic finance be as compared to conventional finance in deep tech with AI, not plug and play tech tools?
All right. So I would say, and maybe Saipul may not like this statement, I would say that there is so much value and wisdom in Islamic finance that has not been brought to life, because we are stuck in banking. And again, Islamic banks have a role to play, right? But we cannot expect them to be innovative because that's just not the nature of banks. Banks are very safe institutions, right? That's just what banks are. My point here is, it's not about finding new innovation. It's about bringing out the timeless wisdom and value that is already there that we have largely failed to manifest into this modern world, right? And technology allows us to do that, right? Like I mentioned earlier, my friend's company is called Takadao. In case you're interested,
Yeah, definitely.
where yeah, Takadao, it's a self-regulating mutual takaful system, right? So let's talk about, let's say, musyarakah. In general, musyarakah is not very popular because it's complex, right? You need to actually calculate what's the profit, calculate whether there's a loss, and then distribute, right? So that process is a lot more tedious than just fixing an interest rate, right? But with AI, with AI agents, with automation, with all these technologies, APIs, and so on, we can actually do musyarakah. Because now, I mean, with a good system, instantaneously, a particular system can use through APIs, enter and extract data of a business in terms of their finance, immediately figure out whether there's profit, and then the profit can be spread, right? It can all be done in real time. They can, if given the ability to connect by API and so on, AI agents can do all these things instantaneously. So we are actually at the start of a new wave of Islamic finance where there's a lot of research done, a lot of theory, a lot of concepts in university papers that just stay there, right? So I hope founders will go look for these ideas and concepts that we already have and see which ones are needed by today's society and how technology can bring that to life.
MashaAllah. Your answer and the questions coming in is always relatable. There's one question here. Islamic finance with too much provisions is killing moonshot ideas, unlike conventional VCs that supports. Do you agree?
No, I don't agree. um, I mean, in the first place, there really isn't much Islamic venture capital, right? The venture capital is all conventional. But I agree that this mindset to think big and to take risks is somewhat or generally lacking in the Muslim world. And it's very strange because thinking big is something, in my view, Muslims should have more of than anyone else of people of other faith. Because we know there's no limit, right? When you study economics, first thing you read is the law of scarcity. Everything is scarce.
Yeah.
But that's not true. We know that's not true. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no limit, right? His risk, rizki that he can pass to us, there's no limit. What we can do if he allows us to do it, there's no limit, right? So Muslims should be the ones who think big. If you go back to our seerah, during the Prophet's time and the Caliphate after that, they were thinking way beyond their size, right? They were thinking about basically conquering, spreading Islam throughout the world. And they were still very small and they were much larger empires around. So today we need to regain back that, again, this visionary mindset.
Inshallah. Um, when we say venture capital, it's all about profit. Of course, at the end of the day, it's about profit. But I believe there is a differences between conventional and Islamic investors. So, do you mind sharing what kind of differences that we aim for Islamic investors and compared to conventional investors, Brother Umar?
All right, thank you. Very good question. So one thing we like to share with the startups that join our program and then we invest in some of them is that when we are building our company, right, as I mentioned earlier, firstly, understand that it's a form of ibadah. That's very important because when you have that understanding, then naturally you'll be ethical. Right? You're not going to cheat when you are doing ibadah, right? That's just one way. You're not going to cut corners and become non-compliant and whatnot. You're not going to do funny things, right? Now, second thing is it is, should think of it as something that we want to build that will outlast ourselves, right? That means I'm building something for future generations, right? Because we know as Muslims, we can live anytime, right? We don't know how long we're going to be alive. So we need to set up the systems, set up the business such that it is something that can endure and continue for a long, long time, right? Now, at the same time, it is an opportunity to create. I would say it's almost a form of da'wah when you create a startup or a solution that's based on Islamic principles. Even you may not call it, we may not use Islamic terminology, right? But when you create a business that is fundamentally there to help society, then you are actually spreading the principles of Islam in a way that is universally good, right? I mean, like people of any background
Yeah.
can see and accept this as something good. Yeah. So I feel this is something that has huge potential in terms of spreading understanding of Islam within the Muslim community and also outside the Muslim community, and spreading it through doing good business, basically. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Alhamdulillah, mashallah. I think we can take one more last question.
But yeah, we're out
Um,
of time.
yeah. Do you fear Islamic fintech is sitting on time bomb because it depends on conventional tech? We only consume tech and not produce.
Yeah. Well, I guess you're talking about infrastructure, right? Where, especially today with the BDS movement, it's very clear this many big tech brands are not hiding it. They are explicitly supporting or going against what we stand for, what humanity stands for in general, right? So, with that, it's very unfortunate that a lot of the infrastructure, I mean, if I want to drive, I'm living in KL now. I want to drive to the other end of KL. What apps do I use? Right? There are only two apps available: Google Maps and Waze. Right? Both
Yeah.
are, ideally not supposed to be used,
Yeah.
but there are no other alternatives, right? So, unfortunately, sometimes that's true. However, if you look hard enough, most things there would be alternative. Almost everything. I think Google Maps is probably one of the very few examples of where there's no alternative, right? But almost everything else you can find an alternative. You just have to, be um, committed to doing so. Yeah.
um,
So I don't think it's a ticking time bomb because there are alternatives. And I mean, the infrastructure layer, Wallahu alam, what kind of potential additional influence or power it may have, right? But in general, it's infrastructure, right? I guess the risk of something blowing up in that sense is not too high. Yeah, that's my view.
that's true. There is someone expecting when is someone gonna build an Islamic foundational model, or is it at work we cannot rely on other companies like OpenAI, Mistral, Meta? Is there any in your angel investors and startup is trying to develop this kind of infrastructure, Brother Umar?
Yeah. So I mean, nowadays, a lot of this infrastructure, at least part of it is open source, which means that
Mm.
anyone can take the code and try to rebuild it and build it in your own way, right? But the point here maybe is a little bit technical. At the end of the day, it goes back to the training of the AI, right? And so I believe it's very possible, and I'm sure there are people doing it within our own community. There are people doing elements of it or parts of it, right? But like a full model, like ChatGPT kind of thing, probably I'm sure somebody's working on it because it's not that difficult to build, given that a lot of the codes are available to the public. Yeah.
Exactly. I think before it's almost 10, I'm taking a lot of your time. So someone from LinkedIn just shared a remark that Islamic finance need to bring out the intricacies that we have not brought to light. An important learning point, especially when you mentioned in the whole session where Islamic finance and venture capital and all these ecosystem needs to work together to bring the awareness and educate more on what is actually Islamic finance and venture capital all about, or else people would see where is venture capital in the Islamic finance industry and just see that it just exists in the conventional. So like you
Yeah.
mentioned, it has been very hard, difficult for people to find Islamic venture capital. So what you're doing now, I believe, is something very noble, and I pray that it goes beyond and it goes expands beyond the Muslim, and it can actually bring the development to Islamic finance itself. So
Amin.
before we end the session, do you have any last words for motivate the future venture capitalists out there and start and the Islamic finance industry's leaders and practitioners on what should be done to move forward?
Sure. So maybe there's two parts to it. One is for the entrepreneurs, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it is very clear to me, and if you do some research, you will see yourself that now is really the best time ever to start a technology business. You don't need to have tech background. You don't need to be a coder, because today, two, three people who are hardworking, who think
Mhm.
clearly, and who leverage well on tools and who learn
Mhm.
fast, you can set up a startup with very little, to almost no money, and you can you can grow, and you can start earning revenue even without raising money, right? Because the world has changed so much with AI in the past 1 year. So that's also part of the reason why venture capital is being disrupted. Now, so on the investor side, given this change or this shift, it is, I would say, the perfect storm for Islamic
Mhm.
finance to enter purposefully um, venture capital, right? Because it's not about big money anymore. It's about um, connecting with entrepreneurs and supporting them and taking calculated risk in entrepreneurs trying to do business, which is a very, I would say, fundamentally Islamic endeavor and activity, right? And again, we don't need so much money today because of the way that the startup world has changed, with mobile, with cloud, and now with AI, right? So Islamic finance institutions, including banks, because there are banks that have a allocation for private equity and venture capital. So start by allocating a small amount, right? Maybe it's CSR, right? Even let's say in Malaysia, R1 million, or in other parts of the world, $200,000 can go a long way. You can invest, $50,000 in 4 companies, right? Or $1 million, you can invest $50,000 in 20 companies, which is a big enough portfolio for a start, right? So I encourage Islamic finance institutions, even banks, to start experimenting, to start getting involved. If need be, start with CSR. If not CSR, put a small allocation. But at the end of the day, in this space, you do need a different kind of mindset and different kind of people to run the show. So you should not try to push maybe, the bankers to become VCs. Yeah. Yep.
Exactly.
Thank you.
All right. So that ends our reflection session for today. Thank you so much for your sharing, and I think it has been encouraging and motivating, especially where you mentioned about whatever that we are doing now, take it as an ibadah, and despite whatever industry that we are in, the audience are in, venture capital, Islamic banking, or Islamic finance in general, take our daily life as an ibadah, and may Allah bless us throughout this journey
Amin.
and provide us the best, inshallah. I mean, so
Inshallah.
with
Amin.
that, thank you so much for your time, Brother Umar Munshi, and
Thank you so
hope
much,
to see
everybody.
you around, inshallah. Thank you, everybody, for participating in this session, and hope to see you in the next session of the reflection, inshallah. All right? Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
MashaAllah, wonderful. This is good.
Alhamdulillah.